All right, so I have the privilege of having managed the county's environmental lands and acquisition and management program for 15 years. That's what the county brought me in to do. Now I'm actually the parks director of the department called Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources. So we try to kind of merge all those things together. And what I'm going to do today is just talk about that program specifically. I can talk about the county's conservation strategy as a whole, but I think this one is the most exciting. All right. So back in the 1990s, Pasco County was sued for necessarily not doing enough to protect wildlife habitat and conservation. Through that lawsuit, the conservation strategy was created. Several policies were included. One of them was the creation of Pasco. Actually, show of hands, who has heard of ELAMP? Okay, we're doing okay. Yeah, Commissioner, I hope you know about it. So that program was created along with some additional, more restrictive wetland rules, listed species regulations, and things like that that the county oversees and partners with the state and the federal agencies. So ELAMP's created. We try to figure out exactly what that means. So we do a study. So in 2002, the county commissions an environmental consultant to do a study to assess what is environmentally significant in Pasco County. In 2004, we create a resolution that outlines how this program will work. And that's actually tied through the penny for Pasco. Everyone knows penny for Pasco, I would hope here, right? Portion of that, 20%, goes to the Environmental Lands Acquisition and Management Program. That's how we get the funding. The renewal of the new penny this cycle is expected to generate $80 million over the 15-year term. So sounds like a lot of money, but when you start looking at actual property values per acre in Pasco County, you're like, oof, it doesn't buy what it used to buy back in 2004, but still very, very happy with that amount. In 2016, so the ELAMP program is a willing seller program. Okay, so that means that there's a nomination process. A property owner is interested in wanting to sell their property. They come to the county. We go through several steps of which a selection committee actually reviews the application. Then it goes to the BCC for approval, and then we acquire it. All voluntary, okay? In 2016, there was a comp plan policy that said you're supposed to do an environmental regulatory action that would help assist the willing seller program. So that program was not that easy to get off the ground because you're talking about a regulatory action that quite honestly would be telling individuals what they can and cannot do with their land if it intersects a certain part of the county that is considered environmentally significant. Well, with the support of the BCC, we actually got that regulation passed. So in addition to the willing seller program, not only do we have that, but when an application comes in for development that is increasing intensity, right? So just think more homes or more uses on an individual parcel. We bring them to the table and we talk about how we acquire their property through the ordinance. There's a whole appraisal process that's set up. I would say that's probably not as fun as the willing seller program where you have a volunteer that's interested, but still very effective. In 2023, we actually updated that because you can see from when the study was done in 2002 to 2023, you can imagine that there was a lot of impacts that have occurred in these areas that I'm going to talk about in a little more detail that we weren't able to protect. Development happened. There was pre-existing zoning. So there was things that occurred. So we've lost acreage there. But what is the objective of ELAMP? So when you look at a map, which I'm going to share here in a minute, Pasco's fortunate that we have, through our partners with the state, we have huge chunks of land that are set aside for environmental purposes. So the main objective of ELAMP was to create these, they were called critical linkages. Didn't sound very fun, so we changed the name to ecological corridors. Critical linkages sounds intense. But the purpose was ultimately in a scenario where Pasco County is going to be built out. So now we're talking, in 2 more years. I'm joking. In a long time. In a long time from now, we would be able to maintain the connections with these core preserves through these linkages. So it's everything that you would expect. You want to make sure that the genetic diversity happens, that there's natural resources that are protected and managed. It also creates a lot of opportunities for natural-based recreational opportunities, which we like to call passive recreation. There's really not a definition for that, but just think not athletic fields, think hiking, biking, and bird watching, low impact improvements. Also expands environmental education opportunities, could be future nature centers or different programs that actually utilize these resources. So targets, when you look at this map, I said that there was 7 corridors, 7 ecological corridors in the county. There's also what was defined back in the study, ecological planning units, which is the EPUs, and then the ag reserve, which is just basically a large open space polygon that said, hey, this might be important. So the purpose of these areas was to focus the acquisition. So again, the yellow lines are those ecological corridors. The basic dimensions of those is typically anywhere between 2,000 feet wide to 550 feet wide, and it depends on the system. But as you can see, what we're doing here is you're connecting all the major systems. Starkey to Crossbar, Connerton to Crossbar, Cypress Creek to Connerton, Hillsborough River to Green Swamp, Cypress Creek southward, Starkey to south. So willing seller program, penny for Pasco funds this. If an application comes in for development, we talk about how we're going to acquire that. And we do actually partner with the state agencies quite often. I know Mr. Simpson's going to be here maybe later today. We do partner with the Family Rural Lands Program, which is the focus of that is to protect agricultural operations long term. But with that also is recreational opportunities through easements. So I'm just going to round up because it's easier. Approximately 7,000 acres are in these areas, these target areas. Sounds like a lot. Does anyone have an idea of how many acres are set aside, like what the total percent in Pasco County that's set aside in conservation and perpetuity? 10%? 20%? There you go. I think you know. You're close. Yeah. You might know. Todd, I'd expect you to know. So we're at about 23%. The county's goal is to get to 30% and having a very, very focused approach on targeting areas that make the most sense. You don't want to set aside acreage that is not ultimately triggering, all the bells and whistles for environmental preservation. So we have a very, very specific program. And to date, we're at around 5,500, I'll just say 5,500 acres protected. So that's pretty good. When I took over the program many, many years ago, I think we had 600 acres. So altogether, outside of the ecological corridors, we're around 6,700 acres that the program has protected through the Penny for Pasco. I think that's quite a success story. I see all the surveys that come in from the public, citizen surveys, and one of the major ones is Pasco's developing so rapidly. And I probably don't do a good enough job getting in front of the board to give updates on this, but I think we're doing a pretty good job in terms of focusing protection where it should occur. Not saying that development is not happening, it's obviously happening, but we can point to this program and honestly say that, hey, we're protecting what matters, and you can't protect everything. So very, very excited about the program, happy with the results. These are just some maps of the actual individual corridors. I'm not going to get into it too much, but as you can see, they're mostly focused on riverine and creek systems. That also has tremendous benefits to we talked about flooding. So if you can protect these areas, in some jurisdictions, they say no development with 100 feet or whatever. In this situation, we can use this ordinance, the ecological corridor ordinance, specifically to say we're going to restrict development through conservation efforts in these areas to mitigate by not putting individual homes in harm's way, right? So that's one secondary benefit of conservation. Everyone gets really focused, you're doing this for the bugs and bunnies, and that's true, but the net ecosystems benefits that actually come with a program like this they go so much beyond just actually the wildlife piece. So again, these are after the meeting, I can give a little more details on this, but so when we buy property, we have an obligation to manage the property. So that there's a team of individuals that sets prescribed burn plans. We do invasive species removals. We do restoration to kind of revert the property back to its natural state. We do wildlife monitoring surveys in the actual corridors where there's intersections with roadways. There's actually 2 planned on 52 right now, not cheap. But you can't protect land north and south of 52 and not give the ability for these for animals and stuff to cross back and forth, or for water to flow properly back and forth. Typically, it's actually an interesting point. Typically, when you have a water conveyance structure that's in one of these systems, you don't have to do a whole lot extra to ensure that there's a wildlife crossing potential there within the actual property, because in most cases it's a span or a bridge or something like that. And if you design it with enough of a shelf, you can make sure that movement goes back and forth. What's on the table? So I talked about the 80 million, and I would love to sit here and say that that's enough, but we have several projects that are actually going on right now. We have one close to you, Lazy Rocking A Ranch, which is about 700 acres, which is up against the Hillsborough River EPU. That's the Ecological Planning Unit. That's going to be a pretty interesting project. And then north central Pasco, we have 4G Ranch, which is one entire ecological corridor owned by one property owner that we're going to hopefully be able to take down through a partnership with the state through the Family Rural Lands Program. That's going to be a conservation easement. And then the other ones in just various areas are up on the board. We do have one that's out in Hudson that is around 220 acres. Been looking at that property for a really long time. These are all willing sellers, by the way. I didn't actually necessarily list the ones that are brought to us through the development process because we're not exactly sure where those are going to go yet. Some current projects. So working with Florida Communities Trust, because not only do we get money through the penny, but we work through certain grant opportunities to extend our money. Back in the day, Florida Communities Trust was a very, very important program for us. We were able to get $5 million in matching acquisition that we actually turn around and take that right and put into land management. So that means that the general fund does not fund the management. I don't have to go to the BCC. I can just say, hey, we're going to redirect those funds and we're going to put it towards restoration and management and pays for vehicles and all that. So that's the way we can extend the program's funding. But we're doing several hiking trails in all these properties. Jumping Gully, the map here is Jumping Gully Preserve. It's 1,700 acres in the Cruz Lake Basin, if you will. We're going to open that up kind of using like the Swift Mud model and kind of do like a passive recreation approach, maybe some equestrian trails. And then I talked about the State Road 52 wildlife crossings. There's actually two, one that's built closer to the Cody, and then another one that's going to be by 4G Ranch. Why does all this matter? So we all know, or we should know, if not, you should look it up because it is factual. Conservation lots usually go for more than a regular lot. So it increases property values. There's an economic impact to this. It creates ecotourism. It does support local businesses. There's all kinds of other services that the folks before me talked about. I'm not going to repeat. And most importantly, it's an opportunity for certain families that have large tracts of land to create a legacy within Pasco County that's really, really important. So with that, I don't know who is next, but I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.